The morning began with Lady Piton's nerves. They were always the first thing awake in the house, long before the servants finished polishing the silver or the daughters finished dressing. Lady Piton pressed a hand dramatically against her chest and paced across the drawing-room carpet. "You cannot imagine what I have suffered," she announced to the empty room. "The anxiety, the palpitations, the torment of waiting." She stopped suddenly and turned toward the door. "And where is Rosalind? Why is Rosalind never where she ought to be?" Lady Cordelia Piton, the eldest of the four sisters and the most admired beauty in their circle, stood near the mirror above the mantelpiece, adjusting the soft curl beside her cheek. Her golden hair caught the morning light perfectly. "Rosalind is at the hospital again, Mama," she said calmly. "She told you this morning." Lady Piton waved the comment away like an unpleasant smell. "She tells me many things. That does not mean I am required to listen." In her trembling hand, she held a letter. She had already read it at least a dozen times since it arrived an hour earlier. The elegant paper was beginning to crease where her fingers had gripped it too tightly. She cleared her throat dramatically. "The Duke of Thornfield," she declared. At the mention of the name, the other daughters looked up. Lady Beatrice Piton, the second daughter, paused her embroidery. She was a delicate girl who always looked slightly worried, as if life itself might suddenly surprise her. "The Duke of Thornfield wishes to call upon us this afternoon," Lady Piton continued breathlessly, "regarding a matter of matrimonial interest." Cordelia lowered her hand slowly. Beatrice blinked. Lady Margaret Piton, the third daughter and the most practical of them all, leaned back in her chair. "What does that mean exactly?" Beatrice asked nervously. Margaret answered before their mother could. "It means," she said flatly, "that we must put on our best dresses and pretend our carpets are not worn through." Lady Piton shot her a glare. "It means something far more important," she said sharply. "A duke is coming to this house to meet my daughters." Beatrice looked startled. Cordelia smiled slightly. Margaret raised an eyebrow. "I cannot imagine why a duke would trouble himself with our family," Margaret said calmly. "He could choose from any wealthy family in England." Lady Piton stiffened. "Your father may not have been an earl," she said with wounded pride, "but he was the son of a marquise's second cousin. Our bloodline is perfectly respectable." She paused briefly. "Our circumstances," she added more quietly, "are irrelevant." But everyone in the room knew the truth. The late Lord Piton had been charming and loving and absolutely terrible with money. His investments had failed one after another until the family was left living in quiet poverty while trying to pretend nothing had changed. London society knew it. Everyone knew it. Which was why a duke visiting their home felt almost unbelievable. "What matters," Lady Piton continued quickly, "is that the Duke of Thornfield is coming here. Today." Beatrice straightened nervously. "What should we do?" "We prepare," Lady Piton declared. She pointed decisively. "Cordelia, wear the primrose silk. It brings out your eyes." Cordelia nodded gracefully. "Beatrice, stop fidgeting." Beatrice immediately stopped moving her hands. "And Margaret," Lady Piton sighed dramatically, "simply try not to speak." Margaret looked amused but said nothing. The next 2 hours passed in complete chaos. Servants dusted the drawing room 3 separate times. Fresh flowers were brought in and arranged carefully. The best china was taken from the cabinet, where it had been protected like treasure since Lady Piton's wedding. Curtains were adjusted so the afternoon light would fall softly across the room. Everything had to look perfect, because the Duke of Thornfield was coming. Meanwhile, a footman had been sent racing across London to fetch the family's youngest daughter. Lady Rosalind Piton. If a duke arrived to find one of the daughters missing, Lady Piton was certain it would be the greatest disaster imaginable. Precisely at 3 o'clock, the knocker sounded. Lady Piton nearly dropped the teacup she was holding. "He is here," she whispered. Cordelia smoothed her dress and sat gracefully. Beatrice looked pale with nerves. Margaret stood quietly near the window. The butler opened the door and announced in a deep voice, "His Grace, the Duke of Thornfield." The man who entered the drawing room seemed to bring winter with him. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark coat, perfectly tailored to his powerful frame. His cravat was tied with flawless precision, and his boots shone like polished glass. His black hair was touched with silver at the temples, giving him an air of calm authority. But it was his eyes that made the room grow colder. Gray eyes, sharp and distant like a winter storm. They moved slowly across the room, observing each person with quiet calculation. This was not a man who had come to flirt or charm. This was a man who had come for business. "Lady Piton," he said calmly. His voice was smooth, but completely without warmth. "I thank you for receiving me." Lady Piton curtsied so deeply, she almost lost her balance. "The honor is entirely ours, Your Grace." She gestured toward her daughters. "May I present my daughters?" The Duke inclined his head slightly. "This is Lady Cordelia, my eldest." "Charmed," the Duke said, but he did not sound charmed. "This is Lady Beatrice." "A pleasure." His voice never changed. "And Lady Margaret." "Indeed." His eyes moved across them briefly before returning to Lady Piton. "I understood you had 4 daughters." Lady Piton's smile faltered. "My youngest daughter, Lady Rosalind, will be joining us shortly. She was delayed by charitable obligations." Something faint flickered in the Duke's eyes. "Charitable obligations," he repeated. Tea was served. Cordelia tried to speak politely about the weather. The Duke answered with short, polite replies. Beatrice attempted to mention music. The Duke nodded once. Margaret wisely said nothing at all. After several minutes of painful conversation, the Duke set down his teacup. "I believe in efficiency," he said calmly. Everyone fell silent. "It has served me well in business and in life. I see no reason to abandon it in matters of marriage." Lady Piton's eyes widened. "I require a wife," he continued. The room seemed to freeze. "My title requires an heir, and society requires that heir to be legitimate. Therefore, I intend to marry before the season ends." He looked calmly at the 3 daughters sitting before him. "I have chosen your family for several reasons. Your lineage is respectable. Your daughters appear healthy and well-mannered." His gaze sharpened slightly. "And your financial situation suggests that my proposal will be welcomed." Lady Piton gasped softly. "Your Grace, I cannot tell you. I am not finished." His voice stopped her instantly. "My wife will want for nothing. She will have homes, wealth, and the protection of my title." He paused. "In return, I require only 3 things: fidelity, discretion, and the production of an heir." Cordelia's face had turned pale. Beatrice looked ready to faint. Margaret stared at him with open disbelief. "I do not require love," the Duke said calmly, "nor do I desire it. I have seen what love does to people. I want no part of it." The silence in the room felt heavy. Finally, he spoke again. "I will marry any of your daughters." His gray eyes moved across the 3 women. "It matters not which." Lady Piton nearly stopped breathing. "You may choose among yourselves," he said calmly. "Send me word. I will return in 3 days to receive your answer." He rose from his chair. At that exact moment, the drawing room door burst open. Everyone turned, Lady Rosalind Piton stood in the doorway. Her gray wool dress was stained from work. Her hair had escaped its pins and curled wildly around her face. Her cheeks were flushed from running across London. She looked nothing like the elegant sisters seated in the room. She looked alive. Her bright green eyes scanned the room quickly. First, she saw her sisters, then her mother, then the tall stranger standing in the center of the room. "What," Rosalind said slowly, "is going on?" Lady Piton forced a smile. "Rosalind, darling, how wonderful that you could join us." She gestured nervously. "May I present His Grace, the Duke of Thornfield?" Rosalind looked directly at him. Her eyes narrowed. She had heard of the Duke of Thornfield. Everyone had. The Frost Duke. Cold, powerful, untouchable. And he was standing in her mother's drawing room. "Your Grace," Rosalind said with a quick curtsy. "I apologize for my appearance. I was told there was an emergency." "There is," the Duke replied calmly. He looked directly at her. "I have just proposed marriage to your family." Rosalind blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "I require a wife," he said. "I have offered to marry any of your sisters. Your family may choose which one." For a long moment, Rosalind simply stared at him. Then something inside her snapped. "Let me be certain I understand," she said slowly. "You came into this house and announced that you require a wife, as if ordering a pair of gloves." Lady Piton gasped in horror. "Rosalind!" But Rosalind continued. "You looked at my sisters like horses at market and declared any of them will do." Her voice sharpened. "And you expect us to consider this generous?" The room had never felt colder. The Duke studied her calmly. "I expect my offer to be considered in light of its advantages." "Advantages?" Rosalind repeated. "You are offering wealth and status," he said calmly, "in exchange for the duties of a wife." Rosalind shook her head slowly. "Marriage is not a business contract." "It often is." "It should not be," she replied fiercely. "It should involve respect, affection, some hope of happiness." Her voice rose. "Not this." She gestured toward him. "Not a man who cannot even be bothered to learn which woman he is proposing to." The Duke went very still. When he spoke, his voice was quiet and dangerous. "You speak of love," he said. "Tell me, Lady Rosalind, did love protect your family when your father lost his fortune?" Her breath caught. He knew. Of course he knew. "I thought not," he continued calmly. "Love is a pleasant illusion." His eyes darkened slightly. "My parents married for love. Within 5 years they hated each other. My mother died bitter. My father drank himself to death." The room had gone silent. "I will not repeat their mistake." Rosalind stared at him. For a moment she saw something behind the frost, something wounded, something human. But she lifted her chin. "One unhappy marriage does not mean all love is doomed." Their eyes locked across the room. Two stubborn people, two wounded hearts, neither willing to surrender. Outside the window, thunder rolled in the distance, and somewhere deep inside both of them, something had already begun that neither understood yet. The silence that followed Rosalind's words felt heavy enough to break the walls of the drawing room. No one moved. No one breathed. Lady Piton looked as if she might faint. Cordelia sat frozen with her hands folded tightly in her lap. Beatrice stared down at the floor in terror. Margaret watched the Duke with open curiosity. Only Rosalind and the Duke remained standing, facing each other like opponents in a quiet duel. The Duke's gray eyes studied her carefully. For the first time since he had entered the house, something in his expression shifted. The cold mask remained, but beneath it, there was the faintest hint of interest. "You believe in love," he said calmly. Rosalind folded her arms. "I believe marriage should mean something." He tilted his head slightly. "And what exactly should it mean?" "It should mean two people choosing each other," she replied firmly. "Not a contract signed out of convenience." Lady Peaton gave a small, choking sound. Rosalind ignored it. "It should mean respect, care, partnership." Her voice softened slightly. "It should mean that the person beside you sees you as a human being, not an arrangement." The Duke listened without interrupting. Then he spoke quietly. "You are very certain for someone who has never been married." The words stung. Rosalind felt heat rise to her face. "And you are very certain for someone who has clearly given up on happiness." Margaret's lips twitched, as if she was trying not to smile. The Duke's gaze sharpened. "You believe happiness comes from love?" "I believe it has a better chance." He was silent for a long moment. Then he gave a small nod. "An interesting theory." Lady Peaton suddenly burst into tears. "Oh, my nerves," she wailed dramatically. "Rosalind, how could you behave so horribly?" Beatrice hurried to comfort her. Cordelia closed her eyes in embarrassment. The Duke remained calm. "I take no offense," he said evenly. Lady Peaton sniffed loudly. "You do not?" "I find honesty refreshing." His eyes returned to Rosalind. "It has been some time since anyone spoke to me without fear." Rosalind lifted her chin. "Perhaps more people should try." The corner of his mouth moved very slightly. It might almost have been amusement, but only for a second. Then the cold expression returned. "I will call again in 3 days," he said. His gaze swept across the sisters. "Your family may decide which daughter will accept my proposal." Then he bowed briefly. "Good day." A moment later, the front door closed behind him. The house fell into stunned silence for exactly 5 seconds. Then Lady Peaton crossed the room and slapped Rosalind across the face. The sound echoed sharply. "You selfish girl!" she cried. Rosalind did not step back. Her cheek burned, but she remained perfectly still. "You have ruined everything." I told him the truth. "You humiliated him." "He humiliated us first." Lady Peaton's voice rose almost to a scream. "That was the Duke of Thornfield." Rosalind's voice stayed calm. "And he behaved like a merchant buying livestock." Cordelia stood up suddenly. "You should not have spoken that way." Rosalind turned toward her sister. "He said any of you would do." Cordelia's expression hardened. "That is how society works." Rosalind stared at her. "You do not deserve to be chosen like an object." Cordelia laughed bitterly. "That is exactly what we are." The words hung in the air. Every woman in that room knew they were true. Marriage in society was often nothing more than negotiation. Margaret finally spoke from the window. At least he was honest. Rosalind looked at her in surprise. Margaret shrugged. "Most men pretend they are in love while calculating dowries." Beatrice whispered softly, "But he was so cold." Lady Peaton collapsed into a chair dramatically. "We will be ruined," she declared. Rosalind suddenly felt very tired. "I am sorry, Mama." Lady Peaton shook her head. "You always do this." Rosalind frowned. "What?" "You follow your principles and forget the world we live in." For the first time that day, Rosalind hesitated, because part of her knew her mother might be right. The house remained quiet that evening. Everyone avoided discussing the Duke again. But Rosalind could not stop thinking about him. The cold gray eyes, the calm voice, the strange honesty in his words. She had expected arrogance, but she had also seen something else. pain. Late that night, she sat alone in the drawing room staring into the dying fire. The Duke had spoken of love as if it were a wound, as if he had already survived something terrible. Rosalind shook the thought away. It did not matter. He was still wrong. Marriage without love was nothing more than a prison. A knock interrupted her thoughts. The butler stepped inside. "Lady Rosalind, a letter has arrived." She frowned. "For Mama?" "Yes, my lady." Lady Peaton had already gone to bed. Rosalind held out her hand. "I will take it." The butler hesitated before handing it to her. The envelope was heavy and sealed with dark red wax. Rosalind turned it over. Her breath caught. The crest belonged to the Duke of Thornfield. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. She began to read. "Lady Peaton, upon further reflection, I have reconsidered the terms of my proposal. I will not marry any of your daughters. I have chosen a specific one. Lady Rosalind." She stared at the letter in disbelief. "I will marry Lady Rosalind, and only Lady Rosalind. She has 1 week to accept or refuse. I do not offer love. I do not offer romance. What I offer is honesty, respect, and freedom. Lady Rosalind may continue her charitable work and live as she wishes within the bounds of propriety. I believe such an arrangement might satisfy her unusual views on partnership. Whether she has the courage to accept remains to be seen. Thornfield." Rosalind lowered the letter slowly. Her mind felt completely blank. He had chosen her. Not Cordelia with her beauty. Not Beatrice with her gentleness. Not Margaret with her sharp mind. Her. The woman who had insulted him. The woman who had called him a monster. And the strangest part was the reason he gave. Because she had spoken to him like a human being. Rosalind suddenly laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the sound of someone realizing the universe had a twisted sense of humor. The Frost Duke had chosen the one woman who wanted nothing to do with him. The next 3 days were chaos. Lady Peaton alternated between excitement and panic. Cordelia seemed distant. Beatrice worried constantly. Margaret simply watched Rosalind with quiet curiosity, but Rosalind avoided the conversation entirely. Instead, she wrote a letter, and rewrote it again. Finally, she sealed it. "Your Grace, I thank you for your proposal, but must respectfully decline. I wish you success in finding a bride more suited to your expectations. Lady Rosalind Peaton." She handed it to a footman and told herself the matter was finished. The Duke of Thornfield would accept her refusal. Life would return to normal. She almost believed it. Until the next morning. Another letter arrived. She opened it immediately. "Lady Rosalind, I have received your refusal. I do not accept it. I will call upon you this afternoon at 3. We shall discuss the matter further, Thornfield." Rosalind stared at the page. "You cannot refuse to accept a refusal," she muttered. But at exactly 3 o'clock, the butler entered the room. His Grace, the Duke of Thornfield. Rosalind groaned quietly. The Duke was already waiting in the drawing room. He stood by the window when she entered, tall, still, watching the street outside. When he turned toward her, his expression was unreadable. "Lady Rosalind." She crossed her arms. "You received my letter." "I did." "And you ignored it." "I did." Her eyes narrowed. "You cannot simply refuse to accept a refusal." "I disagree." She stared at him in disbelief. He took a step closer. "I believe your refusal was made too quickly." "It was not." "It was." Rosalind sighed. "You are impossible." That is what everyone says about you as well." Despite herself, Rosalind almost smiled. "You presume to know a great deal about me." "I have made inquiries." Her eyes widened. "You have been spying on me?" "I have been researching." He spoke calmly. "You volunteer at the Whitmore Foundling Hospital 3 days a week." Rosalind froze. "You refused 6 marriage proposals." She blinked. "You read philosophy." She frowned. "And you correct men when they say foolish things." Rosalind felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You have been watching me. I have been learning about the woman I wish to marry." She shook her head. "You cannot decide to marry someone like this." "I already have." His gray eyes softened slightly. "You are the first person in years who spoke to me honestly." Rosalind felt her heart skip unexpectedly. "And that is why you wish to marry me?" "It is one reason." Silence filled the room again. Finally she spoke. "What exactly are you asking?" He answered simply. "Time." She frowned. "What?" "I am not asking you to marry me today." He took another step closer. "I am asking you to give me time to prove I am not the man you believe I am." Rosalind studied his face carefully. For the first time she saw uncertainty there. "How?" He hesitated. "You care about the hospital." She nodded slowly. "I intend to become a patron." Her eyes widened. "Come tomorrow," she said quietly. "See it for yourself." He held her gaze. "And if I do?" "Then perhaps," Rosalind said carefully, "we can continue this discussion." The Duke bowed slightly. "Tomorrow at 10. He turned and left. Rosalind remained standing in the drawing room long after he was gone. Her heart was racing, because without realizing it, she had just agreed to give the Frost Duke a chance, and something told her that decision might change everything. The Duke of Thornfield arrived at the hospital the next morning exactly at 10. Rosalind had been waiting near the entrance for nearly 20 minutes, pretending she was not watching the road. She had told herself several times that he probably would not come. Men like the Duke did not spend their mornings in crowded charity hospitals. Yet when a dark carriage stopped outside and the tall figure stepped down onto the street, something warm loosened inside her chest. He had come. He was dressed more simply than the day before. His coat was still fine, but his boots were practical, and his cravat was tied without the careful perfection she had noticed in her mother's drawing room. When he approached, his expression was calm, but curious. "Lady Rosalind," he said. "You came," she replied. "You invited me." She folded her arms lightly. "I should warn you, this place is not elegant. The children are not always clean, and the work can be unpleasant." His gray eyes moved past her toward the building. "I have seen unpleasant things before." She hesitated. Then she nodded. "Very well. Come inside." The hospital was crowded and noisy. Children's voices echoed through the narrow halls, and the smell of soap and medicine filled the air. Rosalind walked slowly as she showed him around. "This is the dormitory for the younger children." Small beds lined the walls. Some children were playing quietly on the floor, while others slept. The Duke watched them carefully. One little boy ran past and nearly collided with him. Instead of stepping away, the Duke steadied the child gently. "Careful," he said quietly. The boy blinked up at him and then ran away again. Rosalind noticed the way the Duke's expression changed. The coldness softened. They continued through the building. Rosalind introduced him to the matron, Mrs. Hartley, who examined the Duke with open suspicion. "A patron, you say?" the woman asked. "Yes," the Duke replied calmly. "And why exactly would a Duke wish to help us?" He did not hesitate. "Because the work matters." Mrs. Hartley studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Very well. As the tour continued, Rosalind watched him carefully. She expected discomfort. She expected boredom. Instead, she saw something entirely different. Understanding. He asked questions about food supplies, schooling, and the children's health. He listened carefully to every answer. When they reached the small sick room, Rosalind paused beside one of the beds. A little girl lay sleeping there, her face pale with fever. "This is Mary," Rosalind said quietly. "She arrived 3 weeks ago." The Duke studied the child silently. "Will she recover?" Rosalind hesitated. "We hope so." The Duke said nothing for a long moment. Then he spoke softly. "My mother lost 3 children when they were infants." Rosalind looked at him in surprise. "I was the only one who survived." His voice was calm but distant. "She never spoke about them, but I found her journals after she died." He paused. The grief was everywhere in those pages. Rosalind felt something shift inside her. For the first time, she saw clearly the boy the Duke had once been. A boy raised inside loss. A boy who had learned early how fragile happiness could be. When they left the sick room, the hospital garden felt quiet by comparison. The small space was surrounded by stone walls and climbing roses. For the first time that day, they were alone. Rosalind turned toward him. "You could have pretended today," she said softly. "Pretended to care." He met her gaze. "You would have known." "Yes." "Then there would have been no point." He stepped closer. "I am tired of pretending, Lady Rosalind." She studied his face. The frost was still there, but now she could see the man behind it. "What do you want from me?" she asked quietly. His answer came slowly. "A chance." "A chance for what?" "To prove that I am not the man you believe me to be." Her heart beat faster. "You already proved something today." "And what is that?" "You care." His mouth curved slightly. "I am learning to." Silence settled between them. The quiet felt different now. Warmer. Rosalind looked away toward the garden wall. "I am still not ready to marry you." "I know. But I am no longer certain I wish to refuse." Something hopeful flickered in his eyes. "I can wait." "You may have to." "I have waited 10 years to feel something again." His voice was almost gentle. "I believe I can wait a little longer." Weeks passed. The Duke became a regular visitor to the hospital. Every morning at 10 he arrived. He read to the children. He helped repair broken furniture. He listened patiently to Rosalind's ideas about education for the girls. Slowly the Frost Duke began to change. Or perhaps Rosalind simply began to see who he truly was. The rumors started soon after. Society whispered that Rosalind spent too much time alone with the Duke. Some people suggested he was only amusing himself. Lady Piton was horrified. "You will destroy your reputation," she cried. Rosalind tried to reassure her. "The Duke's intentions are honorable." But the whispers continued to spread. Then, one morning, a letter arrived from the Duke. Rosalind opened it quickly. "My dear Rosalind, the rumors have reached my ears. I cannot allow your reputation to suffer because of me. Therefore, I propose we marry immediately by special license. I know this is not the courtship we planned, but I will not risk your good name. Yours, Sebastian." Rosalind stared at the letter. Marriage. Immediate marriage. Her heart twisted with uncertainty. That evening, Margaret approached her quietly. "I think Lord Ashby is behind the rumors." Rosalind's stomach tightened. "Why?" "I heard him speaking about you." Before Rosalind could respond, another voice spoke from the doorway. "It is true." They turned. Their older sister Elena stood there. Her face looked pale and tired. My husband has been spreading the rumors, she said softly. Rosalind felt anger rise inside her. Why would he do that? Because you refused to flatter him last season. Elena looked down. He enjoys punishing women who challenge him. The truth settled heavily in the room. Rosalind suddenly understood. The scandal. The pressure. Sebastian's sudden proposal. Everything had been forced by another man's cruelty. That night, Rosalind could not sleep. Sebastian wanted to protect her, but she needed time. Time to understand her own heart. So before dawn, she packed a small bag. She left a short letter behind. Sebastian, I cannot marry you like this. I need time to understand my feelings. Please do not follow me. Rosalind. Then she left London. She traveled to a small cottage in Devon, belonging to the woman who had once been her governess, Miss Harriet. For 3 days, Rosalind rested and thought. Finally, she confessed everything. I was afraid, she said quietly. Miss Harriet studied her carefully. You were afraid of loving him. Rosalind nodded. Then you made a mistake. Rosalind looked up sharply. You ran away from a man who trusted you. The truth hurt. What should I do? Go back. Rosalind stood slowly. Yes, she whispered. I must. At that exact moment, someone knocked loudly on the cottage door. Before Miss Harriet could answer, the door swung open. The Duke of Thornfield stood there. His clothes were dusty from travel. His hair was slightly disordered, and his eyes were dark with emotion. You, he said roughly, are the most infuriating woman I have ever met. Rosalind stepped toward him. Sebastian, I asked you not to run. I know. I offered you time. I know. His voice broke slightly. I trusted you. Her eyes filled with tears. I was afraid. He stared at her. Of me? No. She took a shaky breath. Of loving you. The room went silent. I watched my sister's marriage destroy her, Rosalind whispered. I was afraid the same thing would happen to us. His expression softened slowly. I am not Lord Ashby. I know that now. And yet you still ran. I made a mistake. He moved closer until they stood only inches apart. You broke my heart. The words hurt more than anything else. I love you, Rosalind whispered. His eyes widened slightly. I have loved you for weeks. I simply did not understand it until I lost you. For a moment he said nothing. Then he lifted a hand and gently touched her cheek. I rode across England because I could not imagine my life without you. Tears slipped down her face. I am sorry. I know. His voice softened. And I forgive you. She looked up at him with hope. Do you still want to marry me? He smiled faintly. I never stopped. Rosalind laughed through her tears. Then yes. His arms wrapped around her instantly. Yes, he repeated. Yes. Their kiss was warm and certain. The next morning they were married in the small village church. No grand guests, no elegant gowns, just promises spoken honestly. Years later, the gardens of Thornfield Abbey were full of sunlight and laughter. Rosalind stood on the terrace watching her husband play with their children. The Frost Duke was no longer cold. He laughed easily now. When he saw her watching, he walked across the garden and took her hand. Do you remember the day we met? He asked. When you insulted my entire family? He smiled. You walked in late and ruined all my plans. Rosalind leaned against him. Best mistake I ever made. He kissed her gently. Mine too. And in that moment, both of them knew something simple and powerful. Sometimes love did not begin with romance. Sometimes it began with defiance. And sometimes the most impossible woman in the room was the only one worth marrying.